Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Crime Time with Connie. I am obviously Connie, and hello. If you are new here, I sit down every week and I talk about a true crime case. If that is interesting to you, please be sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you can see my videos. So for today's case, I am going to give you guys a little bit of a warning. I'm going to be talking about a lot of people. This might be a long video. This case is like a gigantic spider web involving famous people. You might recognize some of the names I will be talking about today. I am a little bit shocked, but not surprised that there isn't a big movie about this. Today, we are going to be talking about the unsolved 1977 murder of Christa Helms. She was a up-and-coming actress, and she had a lot of connections. She pretty much knew everybody in the business. I have no doubt in my mind that she was going to be a big star. But sadly, her dreams would never come true. She was found stabbed over 20 times in front of someone's house in California. Christa's purse was not on her, and it wasn't in her car either, and it has yet to be found. In her purse was a diary, and the content in that diary is a little bit interesting. You see, Christa had a diary with the list of men she fooled around with. And some of the names are huge. Actors, musicians, people in politics. I'm just shocked. I recognized like 90% of these names. Now, was Christa murdered because of this diary? Was someone afraid that she was going to publish it? Or was she murdered out of jealousy? Some believe Christa was fearing for her life before she died. This is going to be a long episode, so go grab a snack, go get your coffee, and we are going to dive right in. Christa was actually born Sandra Lynn on November 10th, 1949 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was the oldest of 3 girls. Her father, Harry, worked for an asphalt company, and her mother was a housewife, but sadly she was also an alcoholic. Christa's parents would get divorced when she was 3 years old, and she would go live with her mother. When that was not good, she would end up living with her father and his new wife, Nancy. Christa was described as fun, outgoing, confident. She was born to be a star. She had that attitude. She knew what she wanted, and she would have done anything to have gotten her dreams come true. She did have a form of scoliosis, but obviously that did not stop her. She was ambitious. When Christa was 17, she would become pregnant. Her baby's father was a 34-year-old man named Gary. Now, to me, the math ain't mathin'. This was the 70s, but still, 34 with a 17-year-old? No, not good. Gary worked for a karate studio, and Christa became interested in the sport, and she took it on, and she really loved it. She would learn self-defense and become a part of the martial arts world. But she became pregnant, and her and Gary would have to get married. So the couple did get married, but sadly, Gary left. Not a year later or after the baby was born. No, Gary left one day after the wedding. Christa would give birth to a little girl a few months later, and she would name her Nicole. Christa loved Nicole with all of her heart. She loved having a daughter, but Christa was still young. She found jobs to help with her daughter. And Christa still wanted to be a star, and she knew she could get there. Her and a friend decided to go try to be a part of the Playboy Club in Chicago. This is the 70s, baby. Playboy was a poppin'. I think at this time it might have been the late 60s, but still huge. Playboy was huge. And the clubs, they had clubs back in the day in popular cities. You know, the girls in the playmate outfits, the little bunny suits, and they would serve men mostly. And her and her friend went to go try to get a job there in Chicago, but unfortunately it didn't work out. And that's when Christa decided, I'm going to make the move to the Big Apple. She felt like she would have a better shot at finding jobs, acting, modeling, and so she made the big move. Christa would drop her daughter off in Vermont to stay with the lady she found through her roommate in Milwaukee. This lady was a caregiver to the elderly and children. Christa would pay this lady, but by no means did Christa just drop off her daughter and leave. I mean, she did that, but she loved her daughter. She cared for her daughter. She wanted so much for her and Nicole. She would still visit. She just wanted Nicole to have essentially a normal childhood and not have the lifestyle of the hustle of New York City. So Christa's plan was that by the time Nicole was 10 years old, she would have her daughter back with her. Because to her, 10 years old seemed like an appropriate time for Nicole to live the lifestyle that Christa hoped she had by that time. She would be okay with traveling and a luxurious lifestyle, but she felt like Nicole, just having a young child in New York City while she hustled, was not the best for her daughter, so she made that tough decision. While Nicole settled in Vermont, Christa would settle in Manhattan. If you don't know where Manhattan is, it's in New York City. Christa would meet a man named Stuart Duncan, and Stuart essentially became her sugar daddy. He was her financial supporter. Now, Stuart was an heir to the Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire sauce. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a huge sauce. My dad uses it. Stuart did not care to be involved really with his family's business. That wasn't his priority or his life goal. But Stuart wanted to be a part of the theater world. And this is New York, baby. Theater was everything. And he wanted to be on the producing side of that. He wasn't really successful until his third round, and that's when he produced Godspell. Christa was involved in this project, and she actually made a profit off of it. Christa really enjoyed New York. She made lots of friends, and one of those friends was a man named Lenny Barron. Lenny was a successful clothing designer. One of his clients was Judy Garland. Yes, Judy. Most of you know her from The Wizard of Oz. She played Dorothy, and she had a huge career, and that was one of his clients. He also worked on Wonder Woman, and that became super successful. I mean, Wonder Woman was huge. She was a powerful superhero. And this was a time where the woman was everything. Because of his work, Lenny pretty much knew a lot of people. He had a lot of connections. And Christa liked this. She was trying to become a star, and Lenny knew a lot of people. He had connections. So Lenny took Christa under his wing and showed her the ropes, introduced her to a lot of people. And the famous quote is, "It's not what you know, it's who you know." I don't know if I really believe that, but in some senses, yes. Lenny also had a modeling agency called Oddities, and they pretty much hired more exotic looking men and women. He would hire Christa, and she made about $60 for her services. One year during Christmas time, Christa would travel back home to visit her family and her childhood friend Darlene. She would buy Darlene a plane ticket. That way, Darlene can see the big city. Darlene would come and visit New York, and she was kind of a little fish in a big pond. She felt like she's from Wisconsin, and Christa had developed a lavish lifestyle. Christa had jewels and furs and was just fabulous. This was not really what Darlene was used to. Not only did Darlene notice furs and jewels, she noticed a familiar diary. Not just any diary. A diary her and Christa made up back in school. In this diary, they would write about boys. Not just crushes, but like boys they actually had encounters with. Sexual encounters with. Obviously, girls are going to chat and talk about things. Darlene would open the diary and she was shocked. She was stunned. She was surprised because the names she recognized. Not because they were people back in Milwaukee. They were huge celebrities. Actors, musicians. She couldn't believe it. I am going to list some of these people, but this is all alleged. We don't know 100% if this is true. But Christa wrote names of people she alleged she slept with. And that includes Jack Nicholson. He was in The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Mick Jagger, the lead singer of the Rolling Stones. The football legend Joe Namath. Also included was Warren Beatty. He was a famous actor and younger brother of Shirley MacLaine. And he is currently married to Annette Bening, who is also a famous actress. Warren was also best friends with Jack Nicholson. I will talk about that relationship later on. But back to the list, also included on this list, allegedly, was Johnny Rivers. He was a musician. Desi Arnaz Jr., the son of Desi Arnaz, and Lucille Ball from I Love Lucy. Fun fact, my dad's side is from New York, and we would travel to where my grandma lives, and on the way there is where Lucille Ball grew up. And we would visit the museum, not really a museum, but her hometown has a statue of her, and we would go to this diner, and it was just so cool because it was like you take a step back into the 50s, and they had this really cool drink, and it was just, I loved having that experience with my brothers and sister and my grandma, and I was always looked forward to going to Lucy's whole hometown. I love Lucy. I love Lucy. Also on this list was Ryan O'Neal. He is a famous actor, and the Shah of Iran. Yes. I wonder how she met him. Even though Christa obviously made some connections in New York, she wasn't a big name yet. She wasn't a big model or movie star. She did have a small role in the movie Legacy of Satan. It's a movie about a satanic cult with a little hint of vampirism. This was shot in 1972, and some of the shooting took place in her apartment. It would be released in 1974. Her next role was what she was hoping to be her big break. Let's Go for Broke was going to be her first leading role. This film would be financed by her sugar daddy, her financial supporter, Stuart Duncan. Shooting for the film would take place in Haiti. Krista's character was named Jackie. She was kinda like a investigative journalist, and she discovers that these girls are being kidnapped and taken to an island. So she puts herself in the position to be kidnapped. That way she could save these girls and hopefully stop the criminal operation. This film was physically demanding. It had a lot of action in it. Budget was a issue for this film. They had to do a lot of reshoots, and during one of the reshoots, Christa actually injured her back. And this was an issue because she was born with scoliosis. So she spent time in the hospital, and she was not lonely because Joe Namath, one of her friends, was also in the hospital because he had a shoulder injury, I'm assuming through football, and they were buds in the hospital. They even had wheelchair races. After wrapping up production, the film had a hard time finding public distribution, meaning that they couldn't really find people to play the movie in the theaters. There was one showing of the film, and it did have a meet and greet attached to it, and this took place in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are not really sure why it was in Cincinnati. I am from Ohio, and I believe there is a big movie theater there, but usually showings happen in California or New York, maybe Cannes, but they had one in Cincinnati, and she even met the mayor. Since the film wasn't popping off like Christa had hoped, she would try to put herself into gossip columns, kinda like Kim Kardashian would do back in the day. Try to make herself relevant, that way she could get other jobs. Christa was still hopeful that her movie would find success, but she decided to make the move from the Big Apple to Hollywood. She did not make this move alone. She moved with her friend, Lenny. Christa would take on small roles in television. This included Wonder Woman and Starkey and Hutch. They were both very popular in the 70s. By 1975, she would be in a relationship with an actor named Michael Sarrazin. It was alleged that this was the closest Christa would be in love. They would date for about 8 months, and sadly, they would break up. She went on and she became friendly with a man named Bernie Cornfield. Bernie was very successful. He was in the finance world. In 1976, Christa would begin working in a lavish nightclub called Sergio's. It was known for its intimate lounge areas. It would be filled with celebrities and politicians. While waitressing there, a producer of The Godfather named Gray Fredrickson introduced Christa to an actor named George Hamilton. George Hamilton actually sold his home to Bernie Cornfield. Not just any home, I'm talking about a 40-room mansion. It was huge, and Bernie was a ladies' man. It was said, alleged, that he had girls there 24/7. So he needed all that big space for his ladies. The same year in 1976, Christa would move out of her lavish home that was financed by Stewart, and she lived in an apartment with a woman named Stephanie. Christa would begin working on a disco album with the help of Frankie Crocker. He was a famous DJ, radio host, and music producer. He broke down walls with his work. He was just a huge figure in the 70s for music. These two may have been lovers. Now, two of the backup singers on this album were named Patty Collins and Debbie Dinlow. These two are going to be very important. Christa and Patty would begin having a sexual relationship. Patty seemed to be in love with Christa. A lot of people would get bad vibes from Patty. She seemed like the jealous type. Stephanie, Christa's roommate, would notice this. So have other people that have come forward anonymously. Patty was said to have been Christa's age, or maybe a year younger, so around 25 to 26 years old. Christa would still continue writing in her diary. She would still continue the list, and she would record herself and others having intercourse. She didn't record it with the camera, she would just record it audibly. I mean, she could have recorded it through video, but we don't know that. But we do know for sure that she recorded it audibly. Christa would record herself with Patty and George Hamilton. There was a little bit of a three-way track, auto track. Soon there would be a lot of tension in the recording studio for two reasons. One, Patty and Christa's relationship was becoming very bad. Christa would end up kicking Patty out of the studio and off the record. And reason number two, Debbie, one of the other backup singers, her boyfriend was the keyboardist named Blair Aronson. Now, Blair alleges that the night before Christa's death, he and Christa were making love. They were having intercourse. And that's when he noticed his girlfriend, Debbie, outside the window staring at them. That is creepy. Debbie would deny this, obviously, and she alleges that the night before Christa's murder, she saw Patty and Christa and another musician making out with each other, getting frisky at a party. Earlier, I said that Christa ended up getting a waitressing job and she moved out of the lavish home that Stewart was financing for her, and we believe that Stewart cut her off financially, so she had to find a job and a new place to stay. Stephanie would offer for Christa to live with her for rent-free. 6 months prior to her death, Christa would visit Stewart in New York City. We don't know that for 100%, but we are assuming she went to New York to talk to Stewart about money. Now, 2 months before her death in December of 1976, Christa would send a postcard to her friend Darlene, and in this postcard was something ominous. She said, "I'm in over my head. I may need to disappear. Please take care of my daughter." I'm going to assume that something was going on with Christa. On February 11th, 1977, Christa would try to contact a music agent named Sandy Smith, and he lived in West Hollywood. She wanted to come over with her roommate, Stephanie, but Sandy would tell her, "No, do not come over. I am going to bed." He had not slept in 2 days, and he really needed to rest. Christa seemed kind of disappointed in this. Christa and her roommate Stephanie were at a party that night, and Stephanie says that something spooked Christa. She could tell something was wrong with her, that she seemed frightened by something. So Stephanie asked her friend, "Are you okay? What's wrong?" Christa would deny anything. She said she was okay, but Stephanie knew something was not right. That night, Stephanie was actually going to leave with her boyfriend to the beach house that they stayed in, or go to a beach. I'm assuming they're going to a beach house, but Stephanie ended up leaving her car keys with Christa, so that way Christa had a car. Stephanie was going to drive with her boyfriend down to the beach house. Stephanie does not know if Christa left the party right then and there, but while Stephanie was on the way to the beach house, she just had a horrible feeling that Christa was in danger, or something wrong was going to happen with Christa. So she had her boyfriend pull over, and she went to the nearest payphone, and she tried to contact Christa. Christa would not answer, and sadly, Stephanie's intuition was correct, because just a few hours later, Christa would be found dead. We do not know what Christa did after Stephanie left, but all we do know is that she made it to Sandy Smith's house. Not in the house, but outside of it. So we don't know if she made a pit stop anywhere, she went to someone else's house, but by 1 o'clock in the morning to 1:30, she would be found dead outside of Sandy Smith's home. This party that her and Stephanie went to was in Laurel Canyon, and Sandy Smith's home is in West Hollywood. At 1:30 in the morning of February 12th, a man named Thurman Bruns found Christa's body outside of Sandy Smith's home, partially under a car. There was a pool of blood around her. He tried to get Sandy Smith's attention by banging on his door, but Sandy Smith did not answer. This caused Thurman to go to the nearest police station. He told investigators that he saw Christa take her last breath, and this was at 1:30 a.m. Now, we don't know if that is 100% accurate based on her wounds. He would have been there literally seconds after the killer left, if that were to be true. Investigators would find Christa partially under a car, laying flat on her stomach, holding on to a pair of keys. The car she was under belonged to Sandy Smith's girlfriend named Nancy. Nancy was not in the home with Sandy. Police have no clue who this woman is. They do know she is holding a pair of keys, and the car was parked outside of Sandy's neighbor's home. This car belonged to Stephanie. Now, obviously, Christa is not Stephanie, so police needed to identify who this woman was. The detectives reported that one of Christa's tires was blown out and on the curb. However, In the crime scene photos, this is not true. Now, we can come to the conclusion that if Christa was driving crazy, that maybe she was being followed and she was trying to find safety. So we are not really sure what the detectives were seeing with this blown out tire. If it's true, if it's not true, but in the crime scene photos, you can obviously tell that the tire is still intact. It was obvious to detectives that Christa was murdered. She was stabbed over 20 times and beaten with a heavy object. Detectives did not report if there was a blood trail leaving the crime scene or if this blood trail trailed back to Sandy's home. Police officers also did not dust the car for any fingerprints. What was missing from this crime scene was Christa's purse, and this is very important. Christa had her purse on her wherever she went. Where she was, the purse was. This purse was not on her, and it was not in the car, and it has yet to be found. Now, in this purse was her diary, and we all know what is in that diary. It was the list of men she would have sexual encounters with, and I'm also assuming there would be secrets within. So, if the motive for her murder was this diary, most likely they took her purse and might have left fingerprints on the car. We have no way of knowing if there are fingerprints on the car since the car was not dusted. Was Christa trying to publish this diary? Was she trying to blackmail someone? We may never find out. Christa would be taken to the coroner's office, and the medical examiner would find that she was stabbed 12 times anterior, which is the front side of her body, and she had 10 wounds to the back, her posterior side. The right side of her scalp had damaged tissue, but she did not have any brain fractures. On her left side, that took most of the hits from a heavy object we are assuming to be a hammer. So there are two murder weapons, the knife and what is most likely to be a hammer. So her left side was what took most of the beating. Christa also had defensive wounds. She fought with all of her might. She did no self-defense. Her defensive wounds would be on her arms, her hands, and her shins. So she gave up a fight. This killer would slash Christa's throat. There was no signs of unprotected sexual intercourse or sexual assault. Just because there was no semen found on or in her does not mean there was a sexual motive. But based on her wounds, we can assume that it wasn't sexually motivated, that this killing was personal. She was essentially overkilled. Her throat was slashed, she was beaten, she was stabbed. Her toxicology report came back negative for drugs and alcohol. Now, in 1977, cocaine was not listed to be tested for a toxicology report. You would have to request it, but we don't know if she had cocaine that night. This was the 70s, baby, okay? The medical examiner could not 100% confirm if the killer or killers was right or left-handed based on there was too many stab wounds and beatings to determine that. It's on her left side, her right side, her front side, her back side. Not only could they not tell if this person was right or left-handed, but there could have been one or two killers. Investigators would question Sandy Smith. Why was Christa there that night? He says he doesn't know why. He only met Christa twice. He was more familiar with Stephanie, her roommate. Now, allegedly, Sandy Smith's home was known to be a house you'd go to if you were interested in drugs. That's why we think Thurman Bruns was there that night. He was going to Sandy's home to purchase something, and that's when he discovered Christa's body. See a crime, but they heard something. One of them heard a man and a woman, or two women, arguing. And the second witness is John Grice. You might be familiar with him because he is an actor. He played the uncle in Napoleon Dynamite, and he was Greg in The White Lotus. I love White Lotus. I know that they are going to be filming season 3 pretty soon, and allegedly Harry Styles might be in it. We don't know that, not confirmed, but hopefully. Anyways, John Grice was staying in his family's home with his mother to keep her company because his father had recently died. Greg would step outside to see what the heck was going on because he heard screams and he didn't see anything, but police officers told him if he would have physically been on the street, he would have seen, but all he did was just step outside. He did not physically go in the street. Investigators believed that Christa fell victim to the same killer of actor Sal Mino. He was in Rebel with a Cause. James Dean was in that. And he was murdered 1 year, exactly 1 year prior, on February 12th, 1976, near the same location. So investigators believed that the killer of Sal murdered Christa. The only things in common between Christa and Sal is the date of their deaths, February 12th. Sal was mugged and then murdered. Christa was not. She was beaten and stabbed. Sal's killer would eventually be caught and put in prison. This happened after Christa's death. I believe this is highly unlikely that they share the same killer. Investigators would get a big break in the case. Blair Aronson, the keyboardist for Christa's disco album and alleged lover, his roommate Rudy, apparently he talked, and he talked big stuff. One of his friends said that Rudy confessed to killing Christa. Investigators questioned Rudy, and obviously he denied. A lot of friends and family thinks that Rudy just talked to talk. He just wanted to seem big and bad. So, Rudy, did you do it? We don't know. But eventually Christa's case would become cold. Years later, Nicole, Christa's daughter, obviously she wants to find out who killed her mother. So she contacted detectives to start working on her mother's cold case. And they did. 2 detectives started to work on Christa's case again. They went down every old lead. They talked to old witnesses. And they had some leads. One of the leads involved an actor off of the hit show The Sopranos. You might know him as Paulie Walnuts, but his real name is Tony Sirico. My dad might kill me for pronouncing his last name wrong. But he was a huge character in the show Sopranos. Now, Tony was friends with Lenny, Christa's designer friend. And Tony had connections back home in New York to the mob. I believe it was the Colombo crime family. But Tony, he wanted to be an actor. So he went to LA and he became an actor. Now, Stephanie, after Christa's murder, she received a terrifying phone call. She didn't know who this person was. And this person said to Stephanie, "I heard you like to party. I'm down the street." But it wasn't like, "I heard you like to party." It was like, I will hurt you. kind of tone, you know? Stephanie was so frightened, she contacted Lenny, and Lenny had Tony stay with her to keep her safe. Now, allegedly, Tony took furs and auto tapes of Christa's the night she was murdered. Why does he need that? Was there something on the tapes? Did he take something else? Investigators would talk to Tony, and of course he denied taking anything from Christa. And he lawyered up. DNA from Christa's fingernails would be found, and the profile belonged to a female. Now, the information I am giving you is done by the amazing Jamey DuVall. He has, I'm assuming, devoted his life to figure out Christa's murder. His website about Christa's murder is done beautifully. So much detail, I would not be able to deliver this information without his hard work. Now, Jamey has put in his own investigation to solve her murder. And while Jamey was investigating, he said he contacted Sandy Smith to talk about Christa. Sandy Smith says that he was more friends with Stephanie, that he only met Christa twice. Now, this is a little bit suspicious because when police were trying to figure out who this person was, they asked Stephanie to identify Christa's body. Stephanie did not want to, so she said no. Sandy Smith ends up identifying Christa. Now, if you've only met Christa twice, how can you 100% identify her body? Sandy also said that he had a lot of parties at his house, and the night of Christa's death, he had a few friends over. Sandy says there were about 4 people at his party, and he ended up kicking them out because he hadn't slept in about 2 days, so he really needed to sleep. One of the people at this party is known to have been Mark Lindsay, the lead singer of Paul Revere and the Riders. It was a music group in the 60s. He was there that night. Now, the other 3 people, we don't know who they are. Sandy's girlfriend Nancy was not there that night, but her car was. Something bizarre about the night Christa was murdered is that Thurman, the man who found Christa's body, tried to wake up Sandy. He banged on his door, but Sandy did not answer, which is crazy. Someone's banging on your door. There's a girl murdered in front of your house. Anyways, that's why Thurman had to go to the police station. When investigators were done with the crime scene, Thurman actually woke up Sandy and showed him the police's card so that way Sandy can contact them. Police tried to wake up Sandy and he didn't even answer the door. He was still asleep. Thurman would show Sandy the crime scene. They had already washed the blood off the pavement. So after he had this conversation with Thurman, Sandy went down to the police station, talked to the police, and positively identified Christa's body. Now, here's where things get a little bit weird. There was a young woman named Pamela, and she was a known groupie. She would be found deceased in her apartment after unaliving herself, and where she lived was near Rainbow Room. Stephanie recalls Christa befriending a neighbor of theirs, a woman that lived upstairs, and this woman's name was Pamela. Now, again, could be not the same Pamela, but Rainbow Room is not far from their home. It's about a 7-minute walk. Now here's the kicker. There was a man named David Stein, and he worked in the same area as Bernie, one of Christa's ex-lovers, okay? In 2013, there was a comment under a blog dedicated to Christa's death. I'm going to read to you what this person wrote under this blog. It said, quote, "Did anyone talk to David Stein? He knew her better than anyone, knew where she was on most days and who she talked to and what she was up to. Interesting thing also, Pamela, another girlfriend of his, was murdered and was never solved. Did anyone ever put these two murders together? Both women knew the same people and lived in the same lifestyles. Interesting, huh? Question mark, question mark, question mark." When I tell you this case, I'm getting chills because it's just so, it's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon stuff. You know what I mean? But wait, there's more. Patty Collins, lover of Christa, ex-singer of her disco album, she has never been found since Christa's murder. She disappeared. She dropped off the face of the earth. No one has been able to find Patty Collins. Now, there's so many theories with Patty Collins. Was she also murdered? Is she in witness protection? Did she kill Christa? Where is Patty? No one knows. And Debbie, the other backup singer who was dating Blair, who Blair alleges that Debbie was watching them bang. Debbie got out of town. She left after Christa's murder. She put on a wig. She went to Texas, allegedly. She got out of there. But Patty, no one knows where Patty is. Now, they did find a woman named Patty Collins in Montana who was a meth addict. When she was asked if she lived in California in the 70s, she denies it, but her sister said that's a lie, that this woman, Patty, did live in California in the 70s, and she got into some trouble. She needed her parents to come pick her up. Now, this is the tricky part. Someone came forward anonymously and said that he dated Patty, and he actually went to her parents' home, but it was in like East or West LA, not Montana. This person said that he can't really give that much more information. He can't remember. He doesn't know where he went. No one knows anything about Patty or her past life before Christa. Now, Gray Fredrickson, the producer of The Godfather, who introduced Christa to George Hamilton, he said that he heard Christa was killed by a drug dealer, that they killed the wrong Christa because they lived on the same street. I don't really know what to make of that because there's so many people involved in Christa's case. I am hoping that Christa's case can be solved. There's so many people involved in this case. She knew so many people, but this is Hollywood. And this happened in the 70s, where most of its secrets are buried deep. I was kind of curious about Jack Nicholson during this time. I mean, he's the most famous person off this list that I know of. I mean, I knew 99% of them, but it's Jack Nicholson. So I wanted to know what Jack Nicholson was doing during this time. And I knew he was with Angelica Houston, Goddess. They dated for about 17 years and they broke up in 1990. They never had any kids, but Jack Nicholson was a ladies' man. He had multiple girlfriends, but Angelica was the main girlfriend. She thought she was the only girlfriend, but no, Jack Nicholson was a ladies' man. Well, he was best friends with Warren Beatty, who was also on the list. Allegedly, also on the list was Roman Polanski. You might know him because he was married to Sharon Tate when she was murdered by the Manson family. Now, March of 1977, 1 month after Christa's murder, Roman would be found by Angelica Houston at Jack Nicholson's house with a 13-year-old girl. Roman would be arrested for charges related to this because you can't be with a 13-year-old girl when you're a grown-ass man. I don't know if this involves Christa, but these men were not good. Christa probably got with the wrong crowd. And sadly, there's a lot of characters in her case. I'm talking Sopranos, Godfather, finance people, actors, politicians, Shah of Iran. There's so many, in my opinion, suspects in her case. And this is where Jamey is asking for the public's help. You can go to Jamey's website about Christa. I will link it down below. I will put it in the video. I asked him if I am able to share this with everybody, and he said yes. So I'm going to leave Jamey's information. If you know anything about Christa in the 70s, if you met her, if you heard something, please contact Jamey. That way we can hopefully solve Christa's murder. Let me know what you guys think. It's crazy. I'm shocked there isn't a movie about this, because damn. So what was the motive for Christa's murder? Let me know what you guys think. Was it the diary? Was it blackmail? Was someone jealous? Did she know too much? But yeah, that is the unsolved murder about Christa. That is it for today. I really hope to see you guys soon. Please let me know what you think. If you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button. And I hope you guys stay safe out there and stay golden. One more detail I forgot. The man who found Christa's body, Thurman, he would end up murdered. Yeah, unrelated thing, but just something else to add. You know, a little sprinkle of salt on this case. He would end up being murdered for a drug-related crime. Yeah. Okay. Toodaloo.